I sense the problem.
There we go. Good evening. We are live. Just give it a few seconds for people to pick up on it.
Yep.
Hi guys, we'll just give it a few seconds for people to come in and start joining and notice that we're up and running and live. I'm going to share this now. I will tag Malky here. This is what you get when you don't have your personal assistant about. You have to do it all yourself. Come back, Josie.
One day.
One day.
One day.
I don't have one, but she's been stuck in lockdown. So here we go. Right. I will tag a few other people in this as well. Mr. Bogey, of course. Here we go. Joey. Here we go. I won't tag everybody. Yay, right. We are running. Good evening, guys, and welcome to the Accidental Journalist Live and Undrugged episode 22. So we're really going for it now. Tonight I have a special guest, Malky Paul, and he's going to tell us all about his life and his experience, his strength and his hope. Thanks for coming on, mate. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Let's go back to the start, mate. Let's take it back to the start and see where we go from there.
No problem, mate. So yeah, good evening, everyone. And as Jack says, I'm Malky. And I've just to start, I've told my story over the years, you know, numerous times through my work. I've done a short film for community justice, Second Chances, that you can watch on YouTube. And the thing for me is that my story has changed over the years. And the reason that changes over the years is that I've done a lot of work on myself. I've learned more around my mental health. I look at things differently. I see it from a different perspective. So if anybody's heard my story before, it'll possibly change, you know. So for me, just thinking back, I grew up in Gilmerton area. I was the youngest of 3 kids, 2 sisters, my mum and dad, and I was a funny looking wee lad, you know, and I was very tiny. And growing up with 2 sisters, it was good, you know. It was a loving family. My mum worked hard, my dad worked hard. They were like ships that passed in the night. You know, I spent a lot of time in my farm and my grannies and stuff like that as well. And they done the best for us, to be honest, you know. And when I think back, I've got a lot of years from when I was younger that I don't remember still. And I work through that, you know, at times, you know. And I was just a quiet lad, you know. I was quite good at school. I was quite well liked. I was good at football, and that was me up until like primary 7, mate, you know. And when I look back, I used to tell my story and say, I was a quiet lad all the way up to 16, and we had a family breakdown and stuff like that. But then years later, memories came back, and I remember I started shoplifting at the age of 12 and got caught a few times. Went to high school trying to fit in. I used to hang about with different groups of people, different groups of guys and that when I was younger. But I was looking to see where I fitted in, you know. We all went to nursery together, went to primary school. We knew each other and I knew people for the football side. But then I started hanging about a group of lads and I smashed a car window to fit in and they thought I was a bit mad and stuff like that. And we sort of built it on. I started building on that, you know. We were involved in gang fighting with other areas, different schools and stuff like that. And I was sort of running amok on the streets and stuff like that. We weren't the bad laddies, you know what I mean? Just when you boisterous, when you put a group of guys together, group of lads together, do you know what I mean? And I remember dangerous things, you know. I remember carrying a knife at school and having a fight with a guy and pulling a knife out on him. And when I look back and think, what could have happened then? Do you know what I mean? It's just not even worth thinking about, to be honest. For that young age, I started drinking alcohol and hanging about the streets and stuff like that, and I started straight on the spirits. So vodka was my drink at that age, and I couldn't drink. You know, I remember lying on a pavement outside my mate's house waiting on his mum and that coming back in, so I didn't have to go home and get in trouble. You know, I think I was about 14. So we were all just jumping about in circles. And we were known as the chippy mob in Gilmerton, you know. We were all decent lads, as like I said, but we were up to no good, shoplifting, all that kind of thing, hanging about street corners, but nothing really bad, you know. And I remember being at school, high school, and I got attacked by a group of guys for a different area. And they had me under a bus, trying to hit me with metal bars and stuff like that as well, you know. So years of learning. If I go forward years, when I started working, I learned about trauma. You know, I started looking at trauma and how trauma can affect you if it's not dealt with or not managed in an appropriate way. And my trauma for that wasn't managed in a good way. I went to school the next day. I didn't tell them who, didn't grass on anybody, you know, back in the day, didn't grass and all that kind of thing. And I just kept on constantly fighting after that at school, you know. I'd been bullied a few times as a fair young age, and I was battered by a few bigger laddies. And then after that, when I got assaulted by a group of guys, people thought I was a bit mental because I never ran away, you know. And I preferred that. I preferred people thinking I was a bit mental rather than being picked on. So I just embraced that. So I was fighting all the time after that. I was, like I say, I was really good at football. I was involved in the school football team and all that kind of thing. And I always wondered why I never got picked out by a team. And it wasn't until I got a bit older and I realised people actually talk to each other. So if I'm running about mental with knives and up to no good, why are they going to give me a chance? Do you know? It's not just down to your ability and things like that and what you can do. It's about everything else that's going on in your life as well. You know, and I did not think about that until a long time afterwards. So at that age, I was at school and I remember skiving school. I skived school once, Jack, and I got caught. And I thought, you know what? It's not worth it, man. I'm just going to go to school. And they say, so what I done was I like the wee carry on and stuff like that. And I was in quite the high classes because I was quite intelligent. So I just made sure I'd done my work and then got kicked out of the class so I could go and see my mates in the other classes. And that's what I done, you know. And I remember when I was 16 and I was time to leave school, I wanted to stay on. And I spoke to the headmaster, and the headmaster says, no, you're not staying on. Just follow your mates down the drive. So I did. And over that summer holidays, when I just turned 16, my mum had a mental breakdown and ended up in the Royal Edinburgh Hospital. We ended up losing the family home and having to sell it. So I ended up homeless. My dad, he had moved away for a wee while, which I found out later, the reason why, and I'll talk about that later. And my two sisters, my older sister was getting married. She had just got married, and my other sister, she was pregnant, so she was having a kid. So they had their own lives, you know. So after that, I went for, it felt like a stable family home to having nothing. And my granny, she had dementia, and she was bedbound. She only had one leg, so I was sort of caring for her at that time as well. So I was a 16-year-old lad who never had anybody at that point. You know, his world had just been turned upside down. And I ended up going to visit my mum, and it's weird because what I talk about mental health as well. Do you know that when I was growing up, anybody who was different and stuff like that was the town loony and all that kind of thing, do you know, and we would mock them and all that kind of stuff. And then there I was facing the understanding that my mum was now in a mental institution, and I didn't know how to deal with it. You know, I was visiting my mum at the age of 16 in this hospital with people heavily sedated on Legacto and stuff like that, and my mum was there as well, you know, and I remember when my mum got sectioned, my nana turned in and says, "This is your fault," you know. And I never really got an answer to that because they all turned their back on my mum. My mum was one of 13, and none of the family were really there afterwards, you know. And when I look back now, part of the stress added to my mum was that I was running amok on the streets and all that kind of thing, you know, and getting assaulted by gypsy gangs, so that doesn't help. But one thing I learned is that obviously the response of your brain, my brain switched off at the age of 16 for that traumatic event. And for a long, long time, I could not think of anything that happened under the age of 16. You know, so my brain had switched off to protect myself because that's what it does. You know, if you can't deal with a traumatic event, it will switch off until you can manage that mindset. Mm. So when I look back, and it was all that kind of stuff going on, my mum was in and out of hospital for a couple of years. We were homeless, like I said. So when my mates were at home and going to jobs and getting woken up and going to college and all that kind of thing, I had nobody to wake me up. I had nobody to answer to, you know. And my mates had started smoking weed and stuff like that. And I never touched anything at that time. But then when this happened, I ended up starting using temazepam. And within 4 weeks, I'd used most substances, you know. I remember two of my mates went away on holiday and they came back and they just couldn't believe the transformation in me, you know, using speed bombs and Eckies and the base and anything, you know, it was coke and stuff like that. And then I started selling substances. And that's how fast it got me, you know, because it stopped me from feeling and it took away all that shite, you know. I had nobody to answer to, no boundaries, no nothing, nobody to turn to. And and I was off and running, me, you know. For that age, I started, like I say, selling drugs and stuff like that. Me and my mates were hanging about the streets and all that kind of, and it wasn't, for me, when I look back at, we were, what's the word? We were thingy in the shops. We were setting off alarms, and we were telling the guy that we'd stop setting. We'd find the people who stop setting the alarms off and that. If you let me go in and start stealing all his vodka and all that kind of thing. So we were doing all that kind of stuff to the shops and stuff. And we were just, I don't know what we were, man. We were just a group of young lads who were up to no good. But for the age of 16, my mates were my family, you know. They were there for me. They gave me a bed to sleep in. They helped me out no end. Do you know what I mean? And I would have done anything for them. And I did. Do you know, it was that kind of, I'd started enjoying the violence and stuff like that as well that had came with it. So I used to think if I woke up in the morning with a black eye and ripped clothes and next to a lassie, then that was a good night, you know. And then quickly you get a better name for yourself, and it just keeps going and keep going, you know. Where we got arrested, got done for a few things, you know. And when I look back now, my mental health is shot to pieces. And that's what I was using, all the substances to manage that. And I didn't know that at the time, you know. It was just going through phases. Like, if you think back, the Ecky years and all that kind of thing, the clubs and all that kind of stuff, you know. We used solvents and all that kind of thing, you know, buzzing petrol. It was just one thing after another, and it was just a build-up, you know. But we never thought there was anything wrong with it, you know. And you don't, because you're mixing in the same circles and we're all doing the same thing, you know. But when I look back, other people had safe and secure homes. They had places to disappear to. But when I went back, I was on my own, or sleeping in somebody else's house, or, you know, that kind of thing. Usually my mate, it was usually my mate Tommy, to be honest, who we kicked about together most of the time. And I remember, it's quite weird, because I remember one of my mates who was training to be a joiner, and I remember them coming into the pub, and I was sitting with bags of Eckies and bars of weed and stuff like that, sitting in the pub, and he's like, how come you're here all the time and all that? You know, I would love to be doing what you're doing. And I'm sitting there going, I wish I was doing what you were doing. You know, he was training to be a joiner. He had his mum and dad there. He had a stable home, all that kind of thing, you know. So sometimes you think the grass is greener, and it's not, you know. It's that kind of thing, is that I much would have preferred to have had a stable lifestyle there, and actually having a plan for the future, you know, where I never. I was lost, to be honest, you know what I mean? I didn't really know who I was as a young person. I was always quite a really nice guy. But then I quickly learned that really nice guys got treated like shit. And I remember, I do giggle now, because I remember some of the lassies used to say, oh, Malky's a really nice listener, a good listener and all that kind of thing. And my mates would be like, who? Fucking Malky? You know? I'm like, hey, didn't tell anybody, you know, it's no good for my ego, man. It's not good for my reputation. And that's where I started buying into it, thinking I had a reputation, you know? I was a frightened wee boy who had just found himself on a path and was making it up as he went along, you know? My mental health was getting worse and worse. And with that, I was using more substances. So I was addicted to benzos. I was using 60, 70 blues a day near the end. I was selling Valium and stuff like that as well. You know, I was selling Coke, Eckies, anything we could get. And I say that in my video, you know, we were living the lifestyle that we thought was brilliant, you know. And when I look back, it was good. It wasn't, I can't say it was all shite, you know, because I wouldn't have continued to do it. But I wasn't being me, you know, and to that extent, I look back and I suffered from anxiety from a really young age, you know, and that just got worse and worse and worse. When I look back and I got arrested, I got done for attempted murder and got done with 2 attempted murders quite soon after each other. And at that age, I remember me and my mate just says, fucking what's happened, man, you know? I never thought that when you're leaving school or when you were young, you're going to have that kind of tag on your name, you know? So that wasn't even a wake-up call for me as well, do you know what I mean? I'd got to the point where I believed my own shite at that time, and I was pretty violent, do you know what I mean? It was that kind of, I got to the point where I didn't like to get punched, because it was there. So I just hit somebody first, and that's where I continued to do it. And I look back now and I just like, what the fuck what was I doing? You know? And I'm trying to think what else. And I remember all my mates, you know, I've had, when I look back now, a lot of the trauma I've had are losses. You know, I've had so many losses over the years, from a young age, from my granddad to a good young friend of mine who died at 15, a friend of mine who committed suicide, then my granny died, and it was just one thing after another. And you become detached for that as well, you know. And me and my mates were in our own wee bubble, just doing away. You know what I mean? And I remember when I got sent to prison for the attempted murder, and it was tough, man. You know, I'd done a video the last time, and I'd done a 2-hour interview, and they crammed it into 4.5 minutes. You know, so I didn't get they didn't know everybody got the whole thing. The fear of going to prison was worse than the actual experience, you know, because I remember, I look back now and I remember, I think I had a nervous breakdown before I went to prison. And then when I got in there, I knew everybody. It was like a giant community centre. And I was all right when I was in there. Do you know what I mean? I had a bed. It was people I knew. It was the first time I'd been off substances when I was in prison. I put on the weight, started playing football, got to the gym, all that kind of thing, you know. And but then I got a bit of clarity in my head, and I went to prison. Me and my mate got done with it, and I took the blame for them, you know. And he was going to be a dad at the time, and I told him, just go and be a dad. You know, this is my first charge. I plead guilty to it, and go and be a dad. So I went to prison. He started using heroin, and
excuse me,
and wasn't there for his child. You know, and that changed my mind about a lot of things, because we were best of mates. You know, and then you're in, and now I know that addiction changes people's mindsets. Do you know what I mean? But for a long time, I was very angry about it. I was an angry lad anyway about my mum and dad. And then they kind of things just fueled it. And I always used to get told, you're mixing with the wrong crowd. Stop hanging about with all of them. And then longer term, what I realised is I was the wrong crowd. They could go out and behave, and they could, they could do different things. But I was a fucking riot, man. I could cause trouble in an empty room. And when I came out of prison, I pulled away from all of them, all my friends, and started hanging about with another group of lads who were using more substances, And I remember when I go to prison and stuff like that, and I thought, what's a good idea? I'm going to go out this weekend and I'm going to meet the woman I'm going to settle down with. I'm going to get a job and I'm going to have kids and all that kind of thing, So I went out one weekend and I met a girl. We got together. My dad got me a job in the Royal Edinburgh Hospital as a domestic. And I was still heavily using substances and stuff like that. So when I was in the hospital, this is mental. I was in charge of having keys for the wards and all that kind of thing. So I found I was in a ward and I found a cupboard that was fully tenants lager. So I just sat in there for the whole day, for 8 hours, getting paid, taking drugs, stinking all the tenants and watching DVDs. And I thought this was normal behaviour. I thought this was good, all my behaviours were just, I hadn't looked at anything, I hadn't dealt with anything, do you know what I mean? And then my girlfriend at the time ended up pregnant, and I was not very good at relationships, do you know what I mean? I had it in my mindset that if my mum and dad's relationship couldn't last, then why would I get in one, And because I didn't know how to be in a relationship, they were always going to go badly. I wasn't in relation to myself. I didn't like myself, so how could I love or care for anybody else? But here I was bringing a child into the situation. And then what happened was that I'd been cheating on my girlfriend, and I'd been involved in gang fights, and I'd been involved in fighting and all that kind of thing as well. So I've got to tell the story. I got a message on my phone, and it was from this girl, right? And to find out who she was, and she says, I'm the receptionist in your doctor's surgery. I'm like, all right. She was like, I got your number off the computer. And I was like, all right. And we chatted and stuff like that, but she hadn't asked me for a number and all that. Anyway, I met up with her, and we were, obviously she was in my house and stuff like that. I never slept with her, and my mates were coming back for the pub, and I asked her to leave. I said, my pals are coming back, you better leave, So she left, and then she went away and cried rape. And I got done with it. So within 3 weeks, I'd found out I was going to be a dad, got falsely accused of rape, lost my job, and ended up homeless, So that was me just back and running again, man. My head was a complete riot, The lassie I ended up in court for it. Went to the High Court, and she got called. The police went to find her, and she admitted that she had made the whole lot up, And that was horrendous. I ended up with PTSD because of that. And when that was happening, it meant that when my son was born, I didn't enjoy it. It was that kind of thing. I was worried about everything. I had another court case going on. It was just that lifestyle, that you're living, and it's just fucking horrendous, man. And that's where my mental health got worse and worse. And I got diagnosed with clinical depression. And I pushed all my mates away, everybody away I was pushing, because I didn't know what it was, My only understanding of mental health, like I says, was people who were the odd one out and all that kind of thing, and then my mum in the hospital and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't know what it was within myself. And I just isolated, and then I would use substances, and it was just constant after that. Do you know what I mean? And through that period of time, when you're in that lifestyle, man, it just feels like there's non-stop fucking chaos. And loads of things happened. You know, it was more losses, people died. I was not in a great place, you know. And it culminated in my son was 5, and his mum stopped me from seeing him, you know, and I took her to court and I got access. She never turned up. And then it went on like that for a wee while, and then they told me that that she was in breach of a court order. And I says, you can't do nothing to her, man. You know, it's just going to affect my son. And he says, you need to let us do it, or you're going to have to walk away from it. So unfortunately, I walked away from it. I tried to in my head, I was putting my son first, and I didn't want his mum to be punished, you know. And I broke, you know. I think I cried for about 2 weeks constantly. I was just in an absolute state, mate. Do you know what I mean? But thinking back as well, my son was 1 at the time, and I got rushed into hospital because I was vomiting blood. I had a damaged pancreas and liver at age 27, and they told me if I didn't stop drinking, I'd be dead within a couple of years. So obviously I had my son there, so I was saying, okay, well, I need to stop this for my son, but nobody's told me I had to stop using other substances. So I just kept on using them, you know. And then that just culminated in my mental health going down and down with everything else that was going on. And I was still very chaotic, you know. I dabbled in most substances, you know. I dabbled in crack cocaine. But in my mind, I always had that line where I was like, I sort of realised that I would have liked certain things too much, you know, and I justified it by, I'm only smoking weed, I'm only drinking, I'm only using coke every so often, I'm only using tablets, you know, it's not as bad, I'm not using heroin, even though I dabbled in that. I had a dream last night, remembering where I was sitting in the Malden flats, and they were passing stuff around, and I didn't know what it was, but I still used it. But I always had that. People have that line, you know, because there's a hierarchy within the substance misuse field. You know, people who are using it. I'm only using weed. I'm only using coke. You know, at least I'm not using crack. I'm only smoking heroin. At least I'm not injecting it. Alcoholics will say, at least I'm not a junkie. Junkie will say, at least I'm not a jakey. You know, all it is a justification for your behaviour to make yourself feel okay for what you're doing. Simple as that. You know, if you're using substances, you're using substances. Do you know what I mean? Just because you're not using that. I used to hang about with people who are perceived were in a worse state than me, so I could justify what I was doing. Well, I'm not as bad as him. I have 3 meals a day. I dress well. I have a shower and all that kind of thing. So what? Do you know what I mean? Your behaviours are still fucking off the wall, and you're just as bad as anybody. Do you know? You're not any better and you're not any worse. It's that people are using substances to cope with trauma. Do you know? So it got to a point where I was still involved in the justice system. I was involved in gang fights. I was doing all different kinds of shit. You know, I'm not going to go into it because it's no point glorifying that, you know. The point was I was seriously mentally unwell, and I got to the point where I was suicidal and I planned to take my own life. I'd been seeing a drug and alcohol counsellor for a couple of years, and I didn't really think it was making any difference to me. In hindsight, it was really good. But when I got to that point where I was suicidal and I planned to take my own life, you know, and I planned to have one last hurrah, you know, and that day, I can remember it well, it was the most chilled out that I was since I was probably about 15, because I knew that the pain was going away, you know. I knew that after that day, I wasn't going to be suffering. You know, I wasn't going to be worried about not seeing my kid. I wouldn't, all the stuff was gone, you know, and that's where my head was taking me. And the ironic thing is, once I started using coke and weed and drinking, my thinking started changing, you know. So I actually started challenging myself. And I reached out to my dad, and he came and got me. And I remember going to my sister's house that night, and I woke up in the morning and I came bouncing down the stairs like a Labrador, going, I've had enough, man. Fuck this shit, you know. And my counsellor, I spoke to my counsellor, and she says, you're ready for rehab, you know. So I was quite fortunate. I managed to get sent to a rehab, but I'm still very dramatic, you know, and my life back there was like a fucking really bad episode of EastEnders. So I wasn't just going to a rehab. I made the plan. I was leaving for a year, you know. I went and said my goodbyes to everybody and all that kind of stuff, you know. 4 weeks later, I came back with my tail between my legs, because I moved to England for the rehab. And I remember one day the guy came down and he says, if you don't want to fucking be here, just leave. And that was like music to my ears. I'm like, I'm off, man, you know, I'm off. Even after all that hurt and all the pain, and I knew I needed to change and stuff like that, here I was, being given another chance, and my stubbornness was gone. Fuck you, I'm leaving, you know. And the guy took me in a van and he drove me to the train station. He drove me past the local alcoholics who were sitting on the street. And he's like, that's where you're going to end up, and all that kind of thing. I was like, shut up, you dick. You know, he's like, listen, you can change your mind and come back. And my brain was gone, go back. My mouth was saying, fuck you, you know. And he put me on a train. And I remember the train doors closed and I just started crying. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing, man? You know? And I picked up the phone to my care manager and I says, listen, I've left. I'm on my way back to Edinburgh. And he says, come in and see me in the morning. And I got back to Gilmerton, and it was sad. You know, when I got off the train in Edinburgh, I realised that I'd actually made changes in there 4 weeks, because it was the first time I'd been substance free since I was 16, you know. And then I found out that some of my mates were taking bets on how long I would last and all that kind of thing. And that was fucking horrible to hear. Horrible, you know. And I was quite fortunate. I went to see my care manager and they said, what do you want? I said, I need to continue this journey, man. I need to go somewhere else. And they said, you're not going to get there right away. We can't make that happen. It's not going to be a quick fix. So I went to stay at my mum's house. And there was still, people were still up to the no good. You know, it was like Groundhog Day. It was like I'd went away and I'd just been away for a day. You know, it was like, fucking, what's happening? And I had to isolate myself for 2 months and keep myself off of substances, you know. And through the help of a few people, I managed it. And it was hard at that point because my mate's dad died, and a friend of mine died as well at that time. And that I couldn't go to my mate's dad's funeral, and I felt pretty bad for that, you know. But I was fortunate enough to get funding to go to Glasgow to Phoenix House. And when I was in England, when I was coming off all the drugs and all that kind of thing, I was wired to the moon. You know, they were peeling me off the ceiling and stuff like that. And I couldn't take anything serious. And I enjoyed the 4 weeks. You know, I actually had belly laughs and I started enjoying things and stuff like that. But then when I went to Phoenix, I was that wound up because I'd fucked up the first one that I went in there so angry and so like not willing to have a laugh. I was so like, I'm here for my treatment, and you better not be doing this and doing all that, you know. And my behaviours were all over the place. But I went to rehab and I was 3 months free for substances, you know. And everybody says, well, what are you here for? I went, because I need to learn how to keep it in. I need to learn about me. I need to learn how to stay away from that, because that was all I knew, you know. And 2 weeks in, in fact, the first 2 days, my nephew, who was 16 at the time, I was quite good at fixing other people's problems, but no dealing with any of my own, you know. And he was on the phone saying, oh, I need you and all that thing. So I was ready to leave. And a worker sat me down and he says, do you know, if you go fixing everybody else's problems, they're never going to learn how to do it themselves. And that's always stuck in my mind, you know, that if you step in for people, then they're never going to be able to find their own coping strategies and how to deal with anything, you know. So I stayed and I flourished in there, you know. Within 2 or 3 weeks, I was like the poster boy of rehab. I was house manager. I was doing brilliantly. I was supporting everybody. And then I ended up in a relationship and everything went fucking Pete Tong, you know. I went through, and the weird thing, they tell you don't get in a relationship, do you know what I mean? But for me, I could justify it because I was like, well, I'm not using, do you know what I mean? I've got all these feelings back, man. Now I've just fell for someone. And then they found out I was in a relationship. I started sneaking about and all that. All the behaviours came back. I went from being the poster boy to being punished. I was up at 5 o'clock in the morning cleaning. I wasn't allowed to visit my family, all that kind of stuff, you know. And for me, I don't agree with what they've done, because I would have preferred the science behind it, you know. It's the same part of the brain, the pleasure part, that gets sort of hijacked by the good feelings, you know, for exercise, substances, attention for the opposite sex, you know. It's the same part. So it's understandable that a lot of people will get into relationships in rehab, because you're taking away other coping strategies. You're taking away and they're feeling things. They start looking good, feeling better and all that kind of thing. So these things are always going to happen. So I just rebelled. So they started telling me I couldn't do something. So I just wanted to do it more. So I just started giving them cheek, and my behaviours were just fucking very erratic, you know. And I can see why, you know. I can see why now in hindsight. But I left in that relationship, you know. I was 5.5 months into my rehab to go to be 6 months. And I left with a girl, and I remember the community sat me down and they were saying, you're going to end up in prison. She's going to do this, you're going to do that. And I wasn't listening. So I left and she came with me. Within 4 weeks, within 3 weeks probably, she was drinking again. But I stood by her for a year and I supported her. My sister took us in, and my sister was amazing to stand by us. And I supported her to go to another rehab, and she's doing amazingly now. You know, we're still in contact. For me, it was quite a good distraction because I moved back to the same area. But I started putting in a structure and routine in my life you know, that I'd already taken for rehab. So I was up in the morning, going to the gym, going swimming, spending time with my family and all that kind of thing, and this girl. And I built on that. She left to go to another rehab, and I looked at volunteering, you know. I looked at going to college and stuff like that. So I went to college to study counselling. And since I left rehab, and that's been 12 years on the 5th of June that I've been free for substances. And in the last 12 years, the things that I've achieved compared to what I used to be like is like fucking night and day, you know. Previously, I was not a dad to my son, you know. Unfortunately, it took me to lose access to my son to make the changes in my life, you know. That probably pales into insignificance for him because he's not had a dad in his life either, you know. There's somebody else who's bringing up my son right now and doing the job that I couldn't do. So if I ever get the chance to speak to him, I'll thank him, you know, because he deserved to be brought up properly. And at the time, I couldn't even look after myself, man. Do you know what I mean? So he deserved better. Now I've got two daughters. I've got one who's 9 and one who's 6. And I'm there emotionally, financially, my time, you know. I'm a role model to my kids. Do you know what I mean? I'm trying to bring them up in a way to respect people, to accept differences, you know, to be kind, all the kind of things that a good person should be doing for their kids, you know. It's not been easy, I'll be honest. I graduated from college, which was great, but when I came back for rehab, I met up with my dad, and I noticed that there was something wrong with him. You know, I could see it in his eyes, and I asked him to go to the hospital and go to the doctors and stuff like that. And my dad got diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So my dad, he'd been around there he'd seen all the bad times and stuff like that, but the Alzheimer's got a hold of him pretty quickly. He was 59 at the time when he got diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And he ended up in a care home and stuff like that as well. He was there for my graduation, but I don't know how sort of lucid his mind was at that point, you know. And that's a really hard thing to deal with, you know, that all the guilt and the shame that I carry about. And I wish he had seen all the good times, do you know what I mean? So that was, and that's what I'm saying for people, even when you make changes in your life, I always say that to the people I've supported over the years, that life's always going to happen. It's going to test you. It's not going to just give you an easy ride it because you've decided to make changes. So you have to learn to have new coping strategies and learn how to manage situations that are going to arise in your life. And I wanted to use when my dad died, you know, but I got into a position where I look at the consequences, you know. Me using wouldn't have brought my dad back. It would have lost me a lot more, you know. And that just doesn't happen overnight. You have to work hard. Me and Jack were saying earlier on, you know, I used to think that life owed me something, you know. I thought that they were going to come along and just go, do you know what, you've had a tough time. Here, have a great job with loads of money and all that thing. It's all bullshit, man. If you want something, you need to get out there and work hard for it and make it happen for yourself. And the hard work that I've put in over the last 11, 12 years, I'm seeing the benefits of it now, you know. So I graduated from college. I'd done the addiction worker training program with SDF. So I'd done my SVQ2 and I'd done my SVQ3. Then I moved into employment. And and I just put the work in, and I climbed the ladder, you know. And as I say, it was that life's been good, man. You know, it has been. And it's not a coincidence that I don't use substances and my life's been good. You know, I've been in therapy for years. I've dealt with a lot of my issues. There's loads of ways that people can recover. You know, you've got to find what works for you. You know, not one hat fits all. What works for me isn't going to work for Jack. You know, take out of things what you need to help you on your journey, whatever that may be. You know, my recovery is my kids, my work, my family. You know, a lot of people use fellowships and smart recovery, all these kind of things. Use anything you can. You know what I mean? You probably weren't that fussy when you were using substances. You'd use anything. So use anything in recovery. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
So it's, for me, it's been up and down. I'll be honest. You know, when I got off the substances, I realised I've got an anxiety disorder. So I use medication for that. And to be honest, through the stuff that I've been through, to come out the other side and only have anxiety, and I say only anxiety in the loosest terms, I'm all right with that. Do you know what I mean? And I'll work hard to manage that. And I know that if I started using anything, that would get worse, you know? I still have good and bad days, and everybody does. Do you know what I mean? But it's what you do with the good and bad days that make the difference. You know, if you've not got anything positive in your life and you've got nothing to do, and you're just sitting in your own head, it's a dangerous place to be. You know, and I think back, like, and I'm saying that obviously I've had a really good last 12 years. You know, there's been hard times. You know, even a lot of people are obviously struggling with the COVID and all that kind of thing. My mum died last year, last February. You know, I ended up homeless, and I struggled. Do you know what I mean? I really struggled. But I've learned for a long time that I need to talk about things. And it's all right to say that I'm not okay. You know, if somebody says to me, how are you? I'll say I'm shit. You know, I'm having a really hard time at the moment. Rather than kidding on and saying, oh, I'm fine, and burying my head in the sand. Because you have to deal with things, you know. Deal with things in your own time, obviously. It's not about just dealing with it because other people say it. Do you know what I mean? But just remember that it will come out again. Do you know what I mean? And it's the things that, I'll say it again, the things that I've managed to do since being in recovery as well. It's been things that other people take for granted. I've been on holidays, you know. I'm on a few different board of directors, you know. I'm on the Scottish Drugs Forum board of directors. I'm now a manager, a mentoring service, developing it to set up, supporting people coming out of prison, looking at the barriers for people coming back into the community and stuff like that, doing work in prisons, working in the justice teams in East Lothian. It just shows you the things that you can do if you put your mind to it, you know? And if I think back, and if you'd have sat me down 12 years ago and says in 12 years' time, you're going to be on a podcast talking about your recovery and how you're now a manager of their service, I'd have sectioned you, you know? Because when you're in it, you don't see a way out. Do you know what I mean? You don't see a way out. And that's where it's important for things like Jack's doing, you know, to raise awareness. People's stories shows you that you can change your life around. you know. And it's never too late, you know. It's reach out, ask for support. You know, if you're feeling suicidal, speak about it, you know. There will always be somebody there. I spoke to an old acquaintance of a friend of mine a few years back, and I says to him, at that time, I couldn't speak to you, you know. I didn't feel confident to talk about how I was feeling and stuff like that. So I felt it was easier just to push people away, you know. I wish I had have, you know, because all my mates at that time were really good lads, and they still are, you know, but I was a mess, you know, and I didn't know how to deal with it. Nothing they had done, it was all my stuff, do you know what I mean? And so for any guys who are listening, it's okay to say that you're struggling, do you know what I mean? You don't have to man up, you know. It's okay to cry. It's not only women who cry, you know. All this bullshit that we've been taught over the years about men's mental health and all that kind of thing. Listen, doesn't matter what other people think, you know. People would rather have you around and know that you're reaching out to get help rather than turning up to your funeral, you know. And that's what people need to hear. So, I think that's me, Jack.
Really powerful story, mate. Thanks for sharing it. I can identify with so much of it, you know. Even though our journeys were like different at points, you know, the mentality is still there. And, you know, for me, it took me, the people say about rock bottom, the thing about rock bottoms is they always get deeper. So when I hit one, I'd think, fuck it, and go straight through to another, because it was that self-destructive mind that we have. You know, we get self-destructive, self-sabotage. You know, how can anybody possibly love this? You know, for me, trauma was my catalyst. And I've never, up until this past, coming up 7 years next month, that I've been clean, I never dealt with trauma very well.
Yeah.
Trauma was always a catalyst for my using. And then when I had a breakdown, and I would sit there rocking, and I would burst into tears, and, you know, I'd have people telling me to stop living in my own drama, and to man up, you know, and live to these toxically masculine rules. And I couldn't do it anymore. You know, my first trauma was getting told I was adopted, and for most people that would be a good thing. It'd be like, you know, I'm wanted. But, you know, don't get me wrong, I love my family to bits. You know, my adoptive, I love both my families, you know, but it was the rejection, and that sparked my rejection, and that was the trauma that followed me all the way through my life. That would be the fear of rejection. So I would get codependent on people. I would, you know, like I was saying earlier, I would get resentful, massively resentful of people that were doing better than me, in certain fellowships, thinking, you know, you've got the life that I want. Why can't I have that? Well, they're fucking working it, and I'm not. You know, I've been around recovery since I was 14 years old.
Those there, mate.
My 2-day-old niece was punched to death by a bastard of a father. He was then murdered in prison and left the family with questions that would never get answered. And in the past, I would have used on even just a little bit of that. But it's work, not just working 12-step program. I do work a 12-step program. I don't go to meetings, but I work programs because I like that structure. But you know, it's working the programs, it's doing these, it's talking about it.
Yeah.
It's not being toxically masculine. It is actually realizing that men suffer too. Men can cry, which is one thing that I thought was weak. It's not weak to cry. Men can you know, tell you that they're not feeling good. They can, you know, men can be vulnerable. You know, the only time I was vulnerable is when I was semi-conscious or unconscious because I'd taken something. But I've learned that vulnerability is actually part of recovery, and especially recovery from trauma. Acceptance is the big one for me. Not just accepting the things that I've done and putting the guilt and shame aside that I suffered, but accepting, you know, accepting that actually I can't do it on my own. You know, I'm very blessed and I'm very lucky to have what I have today. You know, I met my wife when I was only a few months sober. I was homeless and she was serving in a food bank, and she took pity on me when I turned up. You know, bought me tobacco and took me out for a sandwich, and I never really went home. But you know, these are all things that just handing it all over and putting recovery into practice. I never dreamed that I would, 7 years ago, that I would be sat here doing this. Yeah. My confidence was so low, you know, in recovery. Yeah, I've you know, I've done books and, you know, been involved in some brilliant projects, but I never thought that I would be doing this because, you know, I wanted to be an actor. And then when I realized that some of the actors that I knew were in it for themselves and they were in fact assholes, then I didn't want to be that anymore. So I just wanted to be behind the camera. And I was just getting to the point where I was going to do stuff behind the camera when COVID hit. I was still very low on confidence. You know, trying to build it up. And my good friend, Jason Edwards, who's a life coach and a hostage negotiator, he's got his dream job, agreed to come on, and that's where this all started. And I've grown so much. You know, this is episode 22. You know, I've done 28 podcasts, and I've done 3 or 4 for other people. I'm going to do another one with Joey Barnett in a few days' time. It's just, you know, I don't know what it is. I think it's just the blessings that we get when we admit, and, you know, when we do this, it's all about education for me.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
I'm constantly learning. And it doesn't mean that we share this applied knowledge. We share and apply this knowledge. You know, it's a group knowledge. We learn things through sobriety. We learn things through not using, and we share it with each other, because we can only get to keep what we have by giving it away. That is my firm belief, which is one of the other reasons that I do this, and I get so many addicts on to share their story, because the amount of times I've been spat at, I've been pissed on when I've been homeless. I've had you know, messages telling me that, you know, I'm not a good person.
But Jack, that's the thing is as well, is that I remember seeing people homeless and stuff like that, you know, and you're like, people don't choose to be homeless. People don't wake up and decide to be drug addicts. Nobody wakes up and decides to be a criminal. Do you know what I mean? There's reasons behind everything. And that's what people need to remember, you know. It's about having people there and going, what happened to you? Do you know, what's happened? You know, rather than what have you done? It's what's happened to you, you know. And it can happen to anybody. Mental health and addiction is a level playing field. You know, it doesn't care where you come from, how much money you've got and stuff like that, you know, that it levels it out for everybody. And when you were saying there earlier about it was your trauma, I'm just wondering, did you know what trauma was back then? You froze. Because I didn't, you know, I didn't know what trauma was, and I didn't know the trauma response about fight, flight, and freeze and all that kind of thing. And through the violence and stuff like that I was involved in, I was hyper vigilant all the time. And if people don't know what hyper vigilant is, you know, you're always on edge, you're always waiting for something to happen, you're always, and that's physically and emotionally draining. You know, to be living in a state of hypervigilance for a long time, you need substances to come away from that, you know, and that's where a lot of people will use on that, you know. So for trauma, you've got hypervigilance, re-experiencing, and avoidance, you know. So avoidance should be isolating, using substances, you know. Re-experiences, you're reliving it, like that's what most people think about post-traumatic stress, you know. Hypervigilance, you're shaking, you're on edge, your heart's going, all this kind. So there's loads of physical ailments, and then you put the three of them together, and that's what people are dealing with. Do you know what I mean? And that's where, like, trying to have some work with the job centres and places like that, that you've got to have more empathy and understanding what people are actually carrying about with them. It's so easy just to cast dispersions and have judgments on people, you know, that junkie, that jakey, that fucking criminal, that whatever, do you know what I mean? But there's reasons behind everything, do you know what I mean? So people need to be kinder and think, treat people better, do you know what I mean? It's never just plain sailing, do you know what I mean? It's, you never know what somebody is dealing with or has went through. And that's where, through my job that I'm doing now, we're working with young people as well. A lot of people, young people who are care experienced. And I remember at school thinking, all the people, all the young laddies and lasses who were going to like Welly Farm and all that kind of thing, it's like, fucking gone bowling, they're gone swimming, they're doing all these kind of things. Not thinking that they've not got mums and dads, they've not got this, they've been sexually abused, all these different kinds of traumatic things have happened to people, do you know? And that's where the mindset needs to be changed. There needs to be more work in schools, do you know, to, like you say, knowledge is key. Do you know, we need to be breaking the myths down in schools, talking about things all the time, teaching young lads to be able to talk about things without fear of being ridiculed and slagged and battered and all that kind of thing, you know. It's, we need to break it down for the day dot, you know, so things need to change. So hopefully they do. And sorry, mate, you broke up there, so I just...
That's all right. I've been having a bit, it went a bit unstable for a few minutes, but we got most of it. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. You know, it only works if you work it. We only work if we work it, and by doing this, by educating those that wouldn't necessarily know, or by educating those that are actually in it, that there is a way out, and that, you know, there is a new life to be there. You know, what people don't, I've had so many people tell me that, I've lived by labels my whole life. Most of us do. Junkie, homeless, alky, criminal, liar, violent. All these labels I was given and I played up to them.
Yep.
And I spent I'd sit there smoking crack or whatever, thinking, why can't I just get on and I want to be a good man. And I could never be a good man because that was the label I was aspiring to.
Yeah.
Good man wasn't good enough for other people. And once I realized that actually I'm not aiming to be a good man, I'm just aiming to be a better man, or a better person, a better father, a better role model, a better person to be around, then I realized that we actually do recover.
And it's weird there because it's all the stigma that's lambasted around, and then the self-stigma. If that's what I am, then I will just play up to it,
Mm-hmm.
And that's what people believe, and that's what affects people's self-worth, self-esteem, all that kind of thing, and you just pigeonhole yourself. Well, I can't achieve anything,
Mm.
And that's what I believed. Even when I went to rehab and I was thinking, what am I going to do? Who's got to give me a job? But people will give you a job. Just put the work in, Having a criminal record is not the barrier that it used to be either, and that's where, obviously, for myself, I was a peer support coordinator. So I was training up people with mental health issues, people with addictions, people with criminal convictions, and a lot of things need to change. The stigma of methadone for people, people need opiate replacement therapies. They've got to work they've got to use what they can. The stigma of going to the chemist to pick up the prescription, the way they're treated by professionals, all that kind of thing, all that stuff needs to change. Because for me, it's harm reduction stuff, like they're talking about all the safer injecting rooms and all that kind of thing. There's no point criminalising all that kind of thing, because you're just making a situation worse for people, It needs a radical shake, mate. Do you know what I mean? It needs people like me and you making the decisions.
It does. It's the reform system is broken. The prison system is broken.
Yeah.
Rehab is, to be honest, fucking expensive.
It is.
And if you don't get funding, you're knackered.
Yep. There's no services for stimulant users.
No.
They stopped giving people diazepam prescriptions, and now everybody's taking the fake ones and dying. Obviously not just with the fake Valium, but everything else. Using different illicit substances. But it needs to be a person-centered approach, and you've got to treat people individually. Do you know what I mean? Because you can't just do a blanket across everybody and they've got to fit into that, because life isn't like that. Do you know?
No.
So why is it like that? Do you know? It just doesn't make sense.
I mean, I've discussed this with several people, bank robbers and people like Ray Bishop, who's one of the sponsors, and it's about heads. It's not about recovery for them. It might be about recovery for us, but it's not about recovery for them. It's not about reform for them. It's about heads. It's about boxes ticked. It's about seats, asses on seats, and how many people are in cells or rooms, and it's all put out to who can do it the cheapest, or and it's just they're like, okay, this is what we've got and this is what we're going to do. And there's no sort of budge on that.
Yeah.
And it's harmful, to be honest. It is harmful. Many people get institutionalized. Many people get institutionalized to prison or institutionalized to addiction, you know, or they end up in mental homes for the duration of their life.
Yeah.
Because it's not set up for recovery. It's set up to tackle a problem. It's set up to tackle addiction, or it's set up to tackle crime reduction. That's it. You know, they're not bothered about what's up here or what's down here. They're only bothered about their targets. And that is the problem. That is the massive problem that we're facing today. That's why people are getting out. All they need is a postcode to get out of jail. And they're going back into the same situation, with the same people, doing the same things, falling into the same circles, doing the same crimes, getting put back into prison, and then going through it all again. And it's not set up, you know. And you know yourself, when you're in prison, you think, all right, you know, I want to do education, I want to educate myself. Well, you know, they're set up for the ones that want to do degrees, because they get more money for people that do degrees. They get more money for people that get doctorates and PhDs and stuff like that inside. So, you know, what do we do? How do we tackle that? Because it's just so many people are really hurting. So many people have been failed by the system because it's set up to set you out to be failed. If you want to get into education, you know, you're either at the low end doing your GCSEs or that they're getting paid for, or you're at the high end. Anybody in between, you haven't got no chance.
It is. I know, and it's right across the board. You know, people at school, if you've got a good memory, you'll be okay, because you can remember all the stuff that they're teaching you. It's nothing else, you know. Anybody who's very good at practical stuff, you're setting them up to fail, you know. But the prison stuff's very interesting for me, because that's where my new job is. And for me, it's about supporting people throughout their sentences and looking at the barriers when they come out of prison, you know, because people have the best intentions in the world in prison. I'm going to make this change, I'm going to do that. And as soon as they walk outside and the gate opens, you know, when I came out of prison, I was back doing the same kind of stuff within 45 minutes. So if you've not got nothing in place, then again, people, like you say, they're going back to the same place. They're putting people living above pubs and all that kind of thing. What the fuck's that going to help people? You know, it's just bonkers. So for me, it's about trying to pull organisations together and trying to make the pathway beneficial for people, giving them different options, linking them into services, coming and doing mentoring training with myself, and actually using their experiences to help other people, you know. So being able to show them that they can actually change their lives around. And then you can try and look at the lower and the reoffending, you know. And that's what people have to realise as well, is that I've had to think about this, because I was working in the substance misuse field for a while. And it's not about that, you know what I mean? It's about what's best for that person, you know? If we can support them with what's best for them, it's not about what we think's best for them. It's what they think's best for them, you know? And that's where I can only talk about what worked for me, you know? And that's where I do disagree with different people when they're saying they shouldn't do this and didn't do that. It's not for me to say, you know, because if I say that doesn't work or that doesn't work, then it stops people. They go, well, I'm fucked then, because that's going to work for me. You know, people have to find what works for them. And it's not about anybody else. You know, somebody needs to be on methadone for the next 5 years, but actually, because everybody wants to come off methadone, because there's that much of a stigma. And I know I'm saying it a lot about methadone, but it's any substance, you know, if they're on a prescription, they feel that they have to come off it. And you're like, no. For me, try and get stable and then build in other factors in your life. You know, look at volunteering, get housing. You know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs says that you need housing. You need a safe, secure base to start on. Do you know what I mean? And people aren't even getting that. You know, I presented as homeless last year, and because I never had my kids more than 2 nights, I was not classed as a priority, and I was not classed as having any parental rights in my kids. You know, that's why hostels are fully men who don't get to see their kids, because they don't have them for more than 2 nights at the weekend or whatever. So you're taking away people's protective factors in their lives and the things that people live for, you know, and you're telling them that they can't have that. There's no equality. It's ludicrous. Do you know what I mean? So that we're not really painting a good light in most things on here tonight. There's a lot of, the more I dig into different things, you're like, fuck, there's failings right across the board, don't there? Do you know?
Well, yeah. But there is failings, but you know, at the end of the day, it's a personal thing. You know, my recovery, your recovery, that we share it, we choose to share it to better ourselves. It's a personal thing. The way that you got clean, the way you got sober, and the way that you stay clean and sober is different to the way that I do it, and the way that I do it, you know, is different. Excuse me, to the way that people like Paul Bogey does it. You know, we've all got our own unique take on it. I don't think one person is working the same sort of problem, because not one person can get in your head.
Exactly.
And, you know, you have to work it to your own understanding. But it's about education, and that is the key. Education. Yes, there are failings. Yes, we could talk about it all night. We could talk about the failings of the prison system and the failings of rehabs, but at the end of the day, you do know what you need to do. You know, rehab is a good place to go and learn how to get clean and be clean, and how to live clean with other people. You know, and you know, we don't all do it the same, and we don't all get on, but at the end of the day, we all get on with our own sort of way of living. I want to thank you for coming on, mate.
Thank you for inviting me, mate. Thank you.
Thanks, guys, for tuning in. I see we've got an absolute shed load of comments that I'll go through in a little while. I want to thank you again, Malcolm, for coming on and sharing your story honestly and openly. I'm working on getting some other people on over the next few weeks. I don't know who I'll have on next week, but I'm sure it will be a good one. I'm speaking to Joy Barnett on his new webcast on YouTube, so have a look on here next week at 6 o'clock. And I'll see you soon, guys. Cheers, guys.